Welcome back, everybody, to John and Dan Unscripted. I'm John.
And of course, I'm Dan. Welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in today. Appreciate
Hey,
it.
Dan, how you doing?
John, I'm glad you asked. I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. And you know what, Dan? We have a special guest with us today.
I know.
Hoping everybody can enjoy this.
Very
I
privileged.
want to set the stage just a little bit here.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have with us today a man who was, I'm going to use the word trapped, but he was stuck beyond his ability to leave Ukraine during the time Russia invaded. And his name is Konstantine Degturenko. Konstantine, welcome to John and Dan Unscripted.
Thank you, Don and Jen.
Welcome to the show, Konstantine. Did you want to do a little background, John, or you just want to dive into the question?
Well, yeah, no, in all honesty, I've known Konstantine for probably 10, 12 years, Konstantine. What do you think? We worked together.
Yeah, it's been about 12 years.
Yeah, and we were across the hallmates, so to speak.
Looking at each other each and every day.
And
oh my God, that must have been painful.
This is when Konstantine was living here in the Sacramento area, and he was born in Ukraine. He moved to the U.S. when he was 14 years old. Right. He has dual citizenship, U.S. and Ukraine, and he would tell me a lot about Eastern European politics and things that were going on. This is probably 10 years ago, Konstantine, or so. Well before he left the U.S. to go back to Ukraine. But what we want to hear today is Konstantine's observations and experiences when Russia invaded Ukraine, what he experienced, what he went through, and his struggles to regain his freedom back to the U.S. So with that, as a little bit of a background.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. That was fantastic.
Dan, why don't you shoot the first question over to K-Man?
Well, I was going to ask you how you first learned about your country's invasion, and where were you at the time? Who were you with? Just tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I was living in Kyiv. I went to live in Ukraine at the end of 2019. The first about 6 months I lived close to Romanian border in a town called Chernivtsi. And during that time I was remodeling my apartment in Kyiv, which we kept since we originally got it in the 1980s. So, about June, July 2020, I moved to Kyiv, and I was living in Kyiv until the invasion for about 2 years. And I guess the first indication of something happening was around November, and it came from mostly the Western media. They kept telling us that.
So you had no idea inside
no idea.
your country that the Russians were going to invade?
Right.
You were saying earlier that they had troops along the border. They were always doing exercises.
Yes.
So that was normal for you,
Right.
wasn't it?
So for people in Ukraine, obviously the troop buildup was not something that's unusual.
Sure.
The Russians have done it at least 3 or 4 times previously. And they would bring, massive amount of troops, hundreds of thousands of soldiers around Ukraine, and they would conduct drills, and it would basically last a month, and then they would withdraw. Or rotate, and but it was something that people were used to, so there was no alarm around.
Yeah, so this was a big surprise to you.
Correct.
It's like all of a sudden you start seeing helicopters flying around.
What was it you first observed, Konstantine, that you knew this was not the ordinary?
So the first indication that was not the ordinary was probably at the end of January, and that was because actually I got a call from the State Department, from the U.S. State Department.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I got 2 calls. The first one was at night, so I wasn't able to pick it up. I was sleeping, and they left a message saying that the war is imminent and leave Ukraine as soon as possible.
What happened next? What did you do?
I was living a comfortable life, honestly. I was like, they keep telling us in Ukraine that nothing's happening, everything is fine, that this is just the posturing of the Russian posturing to scare the population. The Western media, they're panicking.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So they keep telling us to stay calm. Everything is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And, and I was living in Ukraine, and I was obviously watching the local news, and I was like, okay, well,
So it wasn't until the State Department called you that really gave you an alert then.
that was the first real indication. And at that time I was living with my girlfriend, and she was like, maybe you should take these guys seriously.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
What was it you first saw that indicated there was a war happening?
so just a few days before the war, the embassy started evacuating, and that was the next indicator.
That's always a bad sign.
It's a bad sign. So I think the U.S. embassy was around February 18th, if I'm correct. So they completely left the country, and then on February 20th, the airlines stopped flying.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, there's a good,
Yeah.
good indicator.
Not all airlines, but Lufthansa, most of the bigger ones, like the low costers, they were still flying. But that was obviously the next indicator, and that was 2 days before the war. So yeah. And then the next thing that happened was Zelensky, he came on TV. He said everything is fine, don't worry about it. But just in case, we're going to declare a state of emergency.
Just in case.
Yeah, just to be as a precaution.
And what did that entail, the state of emergency?
So that that expands the government's power to search vehicles, to set up roadblocks, to restrict movement of people. It gives the government more abilities to control the population.
So that was making it more difficult for you to flee the country.
Not the state of emergency. The state of emergency also entailed mobilization of reserves. So only 2 days prior to the war, they actually called up the reservists. So that was probably the last straw. Yeah.
Well,
and then on the 23rd, that's the day before, actually. Tatiana and I, Tatiana's my girlfriend. I had a craving for pho, honestly. And there was a new pho restaurant that opened in close to Verkhovna Rada, which is the parliament, Ukrainian parliament. So we went there, and we went to the restaurant, and we came out, and we started seeing a lot of police, a lot of kind of people in uniform trying to set up roadblocks, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Defensive positions. So that was the last indicator. So that we left that night. We left 2 hours before the invasion of Ukraine had started.
Wow.
Oh, so you actually were ahead of the invasion. I didn't realize that.
Yes. So we went home, and she wanted to leave that night. She wanted to leave immediately. And she wanted to go back to her hometown of Chernivtsi, which is right. It's the westernmost part of Ukraine, so it's relatively safe. It would be relatively safe. It's the furthest place from Russia in Ukraine. But I was tired, so I thought, man, I need to get some sleep. So I slept for 5 hours, and then about 2 a.m. we got up. Got up about 1 a.m. Obviously, packed the car, and then we started driving. It was very calm, completely. There was no traffic. It was very calm night. No indication that anything was going to happen. Chernivtsi is obviously on the western side, the southwestern side of Ukraine. So the way to get there is
Poland? Is that toward Poland, right?
it's close to Romania.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
It used to be part of Romania, and so the way to get there is you drive directly west to a town called Zhytomyr, which is halfway from Kyiv to Poland, and then you go southwest.
And what happened when you got there?
So the war started before I got to Chernivtsi. So let me get to that. So we stopped for gas about 2 hours later on the place where we had to turn from this highway going west to the highway that goes southwest. We stopped at the gas station, and it was really weird. There were a lot of people going. It was, it was very crowded, and there were some people in uniform, some people wearing just some armor. It was just really strange. But nevertheless, we got some gas, and I also had a gas can, which was actually a very good idea. So I filled up the car. I also filled up the gas can, and we started driving to this highway going southwest. And then the first indication that, and by the way, in Zhytomyr there are a few military bases.
Wow.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, at the gas station, was there quite a long line of people trying to evacuate?
There were a lot of people. It wasn't evacuation at this point because the war hasn't started.
Right.
It was just
but they
people,
were kind of like, something's going on here.
Something's going on. Everybody
Sure.
was, very tense, and there were people who were going to a ski resort to hide. There were people
wow.
going to the border. Everybody was just going into
Somewhere. To
somewhere.
Get away
Yeah.
from it.
Everybody had different ideas.
Well, yeah, because it didn't sound like they were sharing what was going on. They were
Right.
just kind of like,
And what was your plan once you got to your girlfriend's hometown?
So my plan was, I thought that if something had happened, honestly, it would be very quick. I never thought the war would start.
sure.
But if it did start, I thought it would be, 2-3 days, maybe a week, and then that's it. And I never thought about that the borders can be closed, because
Right.
honestly, that had never happened in, I don't think, any country besides like North Korea or any
Right,
authoritarian
right.
countries. So I thought even if something had happened, I could leave.
Yeah. Well, from what I understand, this is the largest and deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II,
That's correct.
and that Russian troops to date, right now, occupy about 20% of Ukraine.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
So I think at this point, the most realistic scenario is just stopping at the current line of engagement, so to speak.
For the aggression to cease and for deaths to cease as well.
Right,
Yeah, I
because
think everybody wants that. Yeah,
right,
sure.
it's unrealistic, for Ukraine at this point to win on its own. And I think the only way that it could win right now, that Ukraine could win, is with foreign troops. And I think that's not going to happen. So
Right. Right. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit, paint a picture for us of those things you saw when the war was fully underway. You went back to Kyiv, I think, right?
yeah. So again, going back to the first question, I mean, once I turned from this gas station and started going towards Chernovtsi, the first indication that has happened was there were a military base to the left of me, and I saw several explosions, and they're extremely bright, like lightning. And I knew that there was nothing on the radio at this point yet. It was just quiet. You could hear insects, in the air.
So you were experiencing the beginning of the war hands-on right there
Right,
in real
so-
time.
Right. So on the left side of me, I saw several explosions. And I knew that the military facility was there, and I knew that it was missiles. So
And at what point on your journey did you have any periods where it was a really close call, that you were in danger, and you look back on it now and go, wow, that was a close call. Something worse could have happened to me or my girlfriend.
well, in Ukraine, obviously every day, especially in Kyiv or even other parts, especially even the eastern parts are more dangerous places. But in any city, you have air raids. So, for example, last year we had 500 air raids in Kyiv
Jeez.
alone. That's more than one per
Yeah.
more than one per day. And several occasions I actually saw cruise missiles flying above my house in Kyiv.
Yeah. I've seen some on YouTube.
So
Amazing.
they flew right above, and then they exploded closer towards the middle of the city.
Were there attempts by the Ukrainian military to solicit you to join them?
There are always attempts. And in Ukraine, the mobilization, originally there were a lot of volunteers. So the first 2 weeks, you actually had a hard time joining the military. Once the volunteers were mobilized and the reservists, they started calling people. And they would just call you and say, we have a general order for mobilization tomorrow 9 o'clock. Come over. That's not a formal legal way of enlisting somebody.
Right.
The formal way is they're supposed to mail you a mobilization order. So I've never gotten an actual document. Informally, they will try to solicit you at every roadblock.
And I've heard stories, or is it true or not, that sometimes they would as much kidnap military age Ukrainians and throw them in a truck and make them go fight. Is that true?
Yes, that's true. Basically, this happens mostly on roadblocks or on the street, and that's actually the reason why most men that actually don't want to join the military are afraid. Most people are actually afraid. That's the reason why they don't want to go.
Well,
they stay
sure,
at
it's
home,
the
so-
giant Russian Empire, right? I mean, throughout history, they've had quite the reputation.
Right, and it's also a fear for you, fear for your family.
Absolutely.
Because even if you're not fearful for your own life, once you are killed or you get injured,
Yeah. What's to become of them?
right? What's to become of them? And you might have,
Yeah.
So,
So, if you would tell us how it ended for you, as far as you personally in Ukraine. How did you get out? Where did you go? How'd that transpire?
I tried to leave several times. The first time, and I tried different ways. I tried even like just talking to somebody. What can we arrange something? That obviously didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I also tried to leave with the U.S. passport. That didn't work either. Actually.
And you had a dual citizenship at that time. Is that correct?
Right. But
Right, so-
in Ukraine, they're very good with databases, so they can find everything about you within minutes.
Wow. So
With the U.S., when I tried to leave with the U.S. passport, I was actually, the guy was really angry. He says, you have to go join the army and fight. But he let me go. So I went back to Chernovtsi, then I went back to Kyiv, and then I traveled also to a relative's place in Dnipropetrovsk. My father is from Dnipro, actually, that's the official name currently. That's very close to the front lines, actually.
oh wow.
That's the hub where they bring all the refugees, and they bring also all the wounded from like Donetsk, from the Eastern Front. When I was in Dnipro, there was a attack on. There's a large factory, so my grandmother's apartment is very close to the main entrance to this factory. It's about 5 buildings away. So this main entrance to this factory was hit by a Caliber cruise missile while I was there.
Wow.
That was a close call.
That was a close call. And Dnipro is also the city where the first time ever a nuclear-capable ballistic missile was used.
So when you got to the border, how did you get across if they kept turning you around?
Well, I got to the border a few times, and obviously every time they turned me away.
Sure.
And there are several legal ways to leave Ukraine, and there are some illegal ways to leave Ukraine. And I'll just go over briefly what those are. Legally, you can leave if you have 3 kids, if you're disabled, if you're a single parent, male single parent, if you are. And also at the time, there was one way to leave legally if you formally live in another country. And by formally, I mean you have to have a stamp in your passport that you are unregistered in Ukraine. In Ukraine, you have to register your residence at the local municipality. So if you formally leave Ukraine to live in another country permanently, you have to go to your local office, submit documents, and then they check your taxes, they check your
And all
criminal-
this while the war's going on.
Right.
I mean, come on, really.
Yeah. So
Submit a form. It'll all work out.
yeah. So those are the legal ways.
Right.
And the illegal ways, which is actually probably what 80% of people have used, which would be swimming across the river, either Tisa River, which borders with Romania, Dniester with Moldova, or Dnipro to Belarus. And there was actually another way which was used originally through the occupied territories.
I've heard that there's over 8 million who have fled the country, making it Europe's largest refugee crisis again since World War II.
Yes, that is correct. There are about 8 million officially. There are probably some that have not been counted.
Right.
I have not been counted.
And I would imagine you have friends and or family that are still in Ukraine. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
okay.
I have family in Dnipro. And Dnipro is one of the cities that has been bombed the most because it's very close to the front lines. In fact, that's, as I mentioned previously, it's the only place where they use the ballistic nuclear-capable missile.
And you were telling us earlier that you've lost friends and family in the war.
Yes, I've lost my nephew. He enlisted the first day. And he actually enlisted in the Territorial Defense Force in Kyiv. So that force was actually initially tasked with setting up roadblocks, and also then they took up defensive positions north of Kyiv. Later, when the Ukrainian troops have pushed the Russians away from Kyiv, they reformed that unit, and it became more of a regular army unit. So he was a mortar operator of a mortar. And then because they have lack of, he was wounded about summer last year. He had his position was hit with a Grad missile. It's basically a missile that's shot few miles. So his position was hit, so he took up some shrapnel. He actually could have left the military at that point, but he decided that he wanted to continue.
Yeah, he wanted to protect his country.
Right.
Sure.
So he went back, and they put him, and then he was, I guess, tasked with doing some scouting, and then unfortunately he and his friend when they went on this mission, they were met with greater force of Russians. That
Konstantine, how do you see this coming to an end? What's the best resolution now for peace to ensue?
Well, real quick, I just want to say I'm really sorry about your cousin.
Yeah.
Or
It's
nephew.
my nephew.
Nephew, yeah. Sorry for your loss and your family's loss as well. So, sorry, John, I interrupted. you.
No, that's okay. My condolences as well.
Yeah.
But do you see a potential ending that could work, Konstantine?
Well, at this point, obviously people in Ukraine, they are tired of war. Everybody understands it's not going well. I mean, Ukraine is losing territory. It's losing people, and every day it's being bombarded, every single day. So at this point, I guess the most realistic resolution is just ceasefire along the current front lines, and hopefully at least the rest of Ukraine that's under Ukrainian control can join at least the European Union. There needs to be some security guarantees, and I think NATO is obviously the best one, but I don't think that's realistic at this point. So at least the EU, and bringing EU troops into Ukraine, I think that would be the most realistic scenario. Because even if without the security guarantees, this war is not over.
Right.
The Putin's big game. He's a visionary. He has a big game, big plan. He will use the ceasefire to try to install. First of all, he'll try to install pro-Russian government in Ukraine, and then he'll try to take the rest of it.
And there's a Ukrainian presidential election in the future.
Yes. Well, the law states that after the end of hostilities, it has to be within 6 months. So
Okay.
yeah. So yeah. When I went back to Kyiv, I went. So I stayed in Chernovtsi for the first like a month and a half, and then I decided to go back to Kyiv. And Tatiana, my girlfriend, she went to Germany. So after that, I went back to Kyiv, and then I came to Kyiv. It was empty.
And when was that? You said you went.
It was
back to
about.
Kyiv?
It was as soon as the Russian troops withdrew from Kyiv. It was March 30th that I think they started the withdrawal.
Wow.
And I was in Kyiv on the 14th of April. And it was just so strange because there was nobody. It was completely empty.
Can't even imagine. Yeah.
And then I took a taxi. I was able to find a taxi, and I drove. I told the guy was Turkish, the taxi driver. And then he drove me, and then we went through a bunch of road. I've never seen like so many roadblocks, really. Yeah. And then I came to my apartment, and I got stuck in the elevator.
Oh gosh. Yeah. How long was that? How long did you get stuck?
Yeah, because I guess nobody used it.
Okay.
And it just got stuck. So I was able to pry it open eventually.
Nice.
It was, and at this point, you're very jittery because you're very nervous. Every single sound actually makes you nervous.
Yeah.
So that was quite an experience.
But once you got out, you didn't go back.
I took the stairs.
No, I don't mean the elevator. I mean the country.
And then just
and again, you have dual citizenship, so you have every right to go wherever
No, and I just wanted to go back to the story. So I went for some groceries, and there was police on the street, and then they asked me because they found some drugs, and in Ukraine the procedure is that if police takes a protocol, they have to have a witness. So he's asking me, "Can you be a witness?" I'm like, "Okay." And he's writing down, and his hands are shaking. And the guy is very young. He's maybe like 22, 23, the police officer.
Wow.
And I look at his hands, and they're all bloodied, like all his whole skin is has damage.
What was that about?
And I asked him, what happened? Like, what's wrong with your hands? He's like, oh, this is from AK-47.
Great.
So the police, because the Russians entered Kyiv, close to actually where my apartment is, the local police had to fight.
Oh.
So at that time I was like, man, that really made an impression.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
Real quick before we go, did you want to say anything to friends or family that's still in the country, in the Ukraine?
Well, hang on. I mean, hopefully this will come to an end, at least to a pause at some point, in the near future. That's my hope, honestly.
Yeah.
Did you want to say hi to anybody? This goes all over the world.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Tatiana.
Tatiana.
Well, she's here with you now, right?
Hi, Nadia in Ukraine.
There you go.
There you go. Well, hopefully this podcast reaches out and meets those people who are interested and who have a vested interest in this topic, because we really appreciate you sharing a personal story with us of what you went through.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me share the story.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
And with that, we have to say goodbye to everybody. And tune in next time. We won't have anything as gripping as this. This is a first and a very unusual story for us, but an important one.
Yeah, and we appreciate you sharing it with John and Dan.
Yeah. Thank you, Konstantine, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you guys
Till
for
next time.
tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. We appreciate it.
Bye-bye.